Hello, my name is Knut Detlersen and I represent the Friedrich Ebert Foundation in the United States of America. Welcome to our newly conceptualized digital dialogue series. Despite the limitations to public life, we as the Friedrich Ebert Foundation remain committed to fulfilling our mission of bridging the transatlantic divide through dialogue and understanding. In this first video of our series, Philippa Hughes, our partner, moderates a discussion by a group of 4 Americans on how their communities are affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and how they are dealing with this crisis. And despite the very tense political divides in the US, you will find in this video a very fascinating on-the-ground report on what is going on in different parts of America, and you will also see different people with differing political opinions having a very civil conversation how to move this society forward. So what makes this video special is that we can see that despite all the differences among us and the political divide, it is possible to agree on some things, and it is also possible to disagree and have a meaningful conversation on how to build a just, safe, and healthy society. So I hope you enjoy watching this video, and if you like the content, please share it and leave comments below. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Philippa Hughes, and I have been organizing a project called Looking for America. And we've been going all over the country to visit communities in which we co-curate art shows in which we ask local artists to answer the question, what does it mean to be American in your community? And I met all of these amazing people because we also had these amazing conversations in which we experienced the art and talked to artists, and then we talked to each other. And all the people who came to the dinners were from across the political spectrum. And so, part of the idea was like, can we come together and have real dialogue, real meaningful dialogue, using art as the spark for that dialogue, and actually listen to each other and try to start understanding where we're coming from. What are the frameworks for the things that we believe? And so today I've got some of my favorite people from across the country visiting with us today to talk about each community's response to the COVID crisis and what's happening in each of their communities. So what we'll do is we'll just go around the circle and have everybody introduce themselves real quick, and then we'll get into kind of some meaty questions. So why don't we start in Anchorage with Wayne?
Hi, my name is Wayne Gould, and I live in Anchorage, Alaska.
And so what's an act of kindness that you've experienced or that you did in the last weeks with COVID?
So a couple things. I mean, one thing that doesn't happen a whole lot in my industry, I work in the medical industry, is people are actively, saying thank you for what you do, which is something that was not happening. What we've been able to do as a family, fortunately, is we have nieces and nephews that live in California, and their unemployment system, it was really, really backed up. So as a family, we were able to get together and be able to help subsidize folks until their unemployments came in. So we're trying to take care of that.
That's really great. Erica.
I am Erica De Leon. I'm in the tri-state Siouxland region of Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. And, as I was thinking about those random acts of kindness and things like that, I thought, gosh, I feel like that kind of stuff happens all the time around here. It's really nice to live in the Midwest where the sort of acts of kindness are just natural, but there's been a lot of just general sharing and collaboration on grant opportunities to respond to COVID and things like that. And just the ways that people are not putting up any sort of silo at this point and not trying to protect their own resources, but we've all been looking at ways to get around that and send clients to each other when somebody else has more resources or whatever. It's been a lot of sharing of resources and information and time and all that type of thing across every organization. So
Yeah, that's great. Let's move. All right, my geography is a little bit off. If I go west, do I hit Arkansas first before I hit Detroit? I mean, east?
A little bit, I
No,
think.
I don't even know where I am in the country. See, this is the problem. Let's go to Arkansas.
Hey, so I'm Daniel Myers, and just to add to your geographical complication, I actually live in the southern part of Missouri, but I have a studio in Arkansas, and so I'm constantly back and forth between Arkansas and Missouri. So I'm kind of a hybrid, but basically here in the Ozarks and in this part of the country. So it's a beautiful area to live in, and I actually haven't been doing very many acts of kindness to other people because I've been stuck in my apartment here. I actually came down with a fever about a week and a half ago, and it hit me pretty hard for a while and had a few symptoms. I don't know if it was COVID or not. I never got tested. I just stayed quarantined, but I had experienced acts of kindness with my family. They would drop by and leave door on my food handle or on my door handle. They would leave food for me. So it was very, very kind of them. And it's just neat to see how people are coming together in this time to try to be an encouragement to each other and help out in times of need like that. So that's my experience of kindness.
Awesome, thank you. And then on up to Detroit with Gracie.
Hi, I'm Gracie Xavier in Metro Detroit, one of the third epicenters, I guess, in the U.S. So, like was mentioned before, I think issues like this really brings out everybody's kindness because we're all in the same boat together. So, like you, Daniel, I've been in and out of feeling sick, and so self-quarantine and food was dropped off to me. But then this is one of those, like 9/11, somebody else that is impacted. So I had an opportunity to pass blessings onto somebody else whose family transitioned through COVID. So, yeah.
Great. I mean, like you said, there's lots of kindness. It does bring out the kindness in people. I wonder, I mean, I don't want to get too off the track with our conversation, but sometimes the kindness wears away and then people start getting very frustrated. And so, I'm sort of preparing myself for when the frustration sets in, because I mean, in our community, we're going to be, we've been ordered to be quarantined through the middle of May. How about you all? What are your quarantine situations?
Ours is May 8th, but we're already seeing as you can already tell down here in Michigan and Detroit, we're starting to see the kindness wearing off because now we're having protests on the streets.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, ours is May 4th. It was April 24th, and then it got extended to May 4th.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Erica?
Our 3 states don't have any quarantine or stay-at-home orders right now.
Oh, interesting.
I think we might be down to about the last ones that don't. There's some city-by-city measures that are being taken, especially in cities where there have been cases. Or like, for example, with Omaha, Nebraska, which is about an hour and a half south, they were taking some of the first cases from China of Americans that were being repatriated. We have a medical center there that always gets, Ebola and all those cases. They bring people into there because they have the facilities for it and the medical team. So that city is under a stay-at-home order, but the rest of the states are not. We're supposed to be social distancing, and the degree to which people do that is pretty varying, to be honest. A lot of people, my family is staying home, but a lot of people are still getting together with friends and family. They'll usually stay outside, but they're still getting together. My husband works in the medical industry, and they're just now starting to see people in the hospital with COVID with kind of on a regular basis, but it's not even bad. However, in our community, we have a lot of meat packing plants, very large ones, and our community was built on meat packing for the last 130 years probably. And so it's just starting to show a lot of positive cases in our facilities around here, which of course means a lot of immigrants who have different levels of understanding of English, and then also concerns just culturally and socially, the way that people already interact, and getting them to stop doing that is going to, it's really concerning. I'm actually really afraid of what the next 2 weeks are going to look like in our community and whether that will change those orders. But yeah, right now, we're just supposed to be social distancing. They're still saying groups of under 10. So I don't know. A lot of companies are taking different measures and people are working from home, and most churches have been canceled. But again, people continue to be out and about and get takeout. Seems like there's a lot of cars whenever I have to go out on an emergency trip. So it's concerning.
Yeah.
We're till May 5th. They're talking about opening up with considering, non-essential businesses. But, again, who's going to decide what's non-essential versus what's essential? That's going to be the hard part. We're fortunate in the fact that, there's only 740,000 people in my state, and we're very separated as it is. So in the bigger areas is we're having, folks with issues with the coronavirus. We have to date 321. We've had 46 hospitalizations, and we've had 9 deaths. So I think that our government got on this pretty quick to shut things down and to talk about social distances and things like that. So right now we're doing pretty good, other than folks being out of work, but we've had a good response between the stimulus and they've done stuff to where the first 8 weeks people are getting an extra $600 a week in unemployment to help families out, and that came immediately. So it wasn't something that it didn't drag out like some of the states. So that's kind of the sad part, is how long it takes for wherever you're at to actually respond and get people what they need when they need it.
That $600 is coming from the state government.
Yes.
Yeah, the unemployment, not the Anchorage. That's interesting. That's great. Interesting. Like, how are you all feeling about? Because like here in DC, we are under orders to stay quarantined until May 18th. But I keep reading all this stuff about how until we find a vaccine, like in theory, we can't really reopen, so to speak, until many months, until we find a vaccine, until we get, do better tracing, contact tracing, and all that other stuff. I mean, what are your thoughts? Like, should we be reopening sooner, later? What are you thinking?
Anytime the government is taking this much control and is enforcing something as severe as quarantining and shutting down businesses, there's just the skepticism as to, okay, what's the truth behind this? Is this something is this innocent, or is this what the government needs to do, or what? It just raises questions. And it, like, for us, we don't, I don't know. I'm not the expert on this. I don't know everything behind the scenes, what's going on. So I can't say with any sort of dogmatism, this is the way it should be. This is the way it should be. But that's how there's kind of this debate in our community. I know just this conversation of, what is the right level of involvement for the government to have? I know, like, Arkansas has done more of just a suggestion that people stay at home, but they haven't made it an official order. Whereas Missouri, it is an official order. But, obviously doing a suggestion, I like that better from a perspective of just the government not being as heavy. But at the same time, I know that people in Arkansas aren't doing as good of a job of staying away from each other and social distancing. So I do think that Missouri's order has created a little more effective means of really making sure people are staying at home. So, it's a tough issue. I'm trusting that our government leaders are, really getting to the bottom of the issue and doing what's in the best interest of the people, because I do believe that ultimately government's purpose is to protect. And this does fall within, that boundary of protecting the people. So there's certainly a case to be made, for that this is within government's, within their rightful place, to do these stay-at-home orders. But I'd say I am really thankful that there hasn't been a national stay-at-home order, just because I think it's something that should be done on more of a local level, because every state is different, every community is different. And I would really prefer that, and rather than the governor of Missouri, doing a statewide order, that we even do it on an even more local level. I know that our county here where I live had already done a stay-at-home order before it was ever a statewide order, and it was our community, because we know, our leaders know this community well. They know the dynamics and the demographics and the economy and all that, and how many cases we had. So they were able to make a really good decision for this specific area. And I think that that's a good model, just keeping it as local as possible when you're doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Erica, you raised your hand.
I agree with everything Danny said. I think that's kind of how we feel in this area, because our 3 states don't have the orders, is that a lot of folks feel like they want to be able to make that decision about how much time they're actually quarantining themselves versus being out and about, and they don't like the heavy hand of government in a lot of cases. And then those people who feel like they do need to be staying home are a lot more diligent about it. But I think the common thread is that everybody agrees that testing needs to be more available before we get back to opening up. And that's it primarily because a lot of the folks that I'm working with are either working with or working in the packing houses and all of our food processing companies. And we've got everything from pork and beef to ice cream around here. So we've got the whole gamut of food processing, but we worry about all of those people. It's a significant part of our community, not just in numbers that work there, but those that they live with and those that they're close to. And it's thousands of people that would be out of work if they become sick or that would infect others. And it's just such a big chunk of our economy and our community and our people that if there's not a way to be testing people and find out either that they've had it and developed the antibodies or that at least they're not sick today when they go to work, then I think a lot of people would feel better about opening the economy and the community in general. So I think that's kind of where everybody is. There's such a mix of opinions on whether we should have stay-at-home orders or not and whether people are following that. And then I have family in Colorado who has a stay-at-home order, but has said there's so many exemptions to who's considered essential that it basically hasn't really changed anything. And I think that in our tri-state area, that's kind of how people feel, is that there are so many essential workers, it's not really going to change too much anyway, because everyone else is adjusting and working from home and ordering groceries online and things like that. So but I think it comes back to testing.
Yeah, I think that's right. Gracie, Detroit is becoming an epicenter. And I mean, where are you all at? Where are you personally at? And where do you think your community is at in terms of the government response?
I think inconsistent government response, nationally impacted responses across the board, across the nation, that you've seen the inconsistencies impacting communities all over the United States. I think they were looking for that lead and having to step and make the decision for this to protect, like Daniel said, their own states was something that was needed. And I think in Michigan, it was done rather quickly. I think one of the things you realize with COVID is that it's definitely going to impact your community in some way or some form, even if you yourself did not have the virus, because you have to go to the grocery store. Your mailman's going to have to deliver your mail. Somebody is going to be in contact with you, whether they were an essential worker or not an essential worker, and it's going to travel. So if everyone's not respecting the stay-at-home order, which they don't, some people don't, and some people do, then it's a part of that inconsideration that's causing the virus to spread even more and more. But once the decision is made, whether we're staying at home, everyone to follow that has been a challenge, because I think one thing we forget is the essential workers are the ones that are servicing us in so many ways. And you have to have some level of privilege to stay at home. And if you don't have that privilege to stay at home, then you're out there. Like, we had the perfect example, you all saw it nationally, of the bus driver who complained of the customer in the bus that was coughing, did not have any protective gear. Then he proceeded to die a week later. I think that it's always a hard job for any government or leader to make these types of decisions, because it is going to impact your community in such a way. And for us, Detroit's story, we were becoming the comeback kid. And now you have where all small businesses, in some of the major small businesses, our restaurants are closed, right, and can't service. So we're thinking about how are we going to rebound from a rebound? So I think that's a conversation to have. And I don't disagree with our governor at all, but you have to think at the speed that decisions were made and actions are taken, it's not responding as quickly to how it's going to impact an individual's life, right? Like unemployment, like you're saying in your state, Wayne, some people are already seeing that check. Well, some people can't even get through the phone to actually talk to the employment office to make sure that things are being processed. So I think it's how it's impacting individual lives, individual families, and did we set the interventions in place, and could we have set the interventions in place to better support the individual families to their particular communities?
Mm-hmm. Wayne, what do you think?
Well, I think, Gracie is 100% correct. I think part of the problem that we're running into with, seeing throughout the nation is the inconsistency of how people are getting support. And so if people are not getting the support, then that's where you're going to have more frustration, more anger. And it's at that point, if your state is not doing their job, then the feds probably are going to have to step in to help mandate some stuff. The sad thing about this virus, in my opinion, is it's out there. It's like the flu and any other virus that's out there. It's going to come around year after year after year, and some people are going to get it. Some people are not going to get it, even with the vaccinations. So is this something that we're going to have to do every year, to where we have to worry about shutting down because we're not prepared? I think right now in our state, the thing that scared people is our medical community would not be prepared enough for large influx of people getting it. And I think a lot of other communities were, feeling the same thing. If they don't have enough, doctors and respirators and, medical supplies for people that are coming in, those are the folks that are having a hard time, with the fear of this. I think you're either going to get it or you're not going to get it. And I'm hoping that coming out of this, people are going to practice better hygiene. I think that it would be nice to see, people practicing a little bit better social distancing. Otherwise, we're just going to have spikes. Like I said, they're going to open us back up May 5th is what they're telling us. And if people don't practice the things that they've learned over the past, 4 to 6 weeks, it's going to be for naught, because we're going to have a huge spike and they're going to shut us down again. And that's not going to help anybody. So I'm really hoping that people will start listening to some common sense about, washing their hands and being able to better social distance. It's sad to see what's happening to people. And I don't think, from the government side, from a national, I think the stimulus, it came too late for some folks, and it's finally there, but the impact that it's happened to some families and some of these smaller businesses are going to be pretty sad outcomes.
Yes.
And you're highlighting to the particular space that I work on is in immigrant inclusive economic development and small Main Street businesses, and we're like, the question we ask ourselves, do you know anyone that has actually gotten the stimulus package? Not the check. We know some people are check, but like a PPE loan, or, and were there systems in place to make it for, especially what sustains America is small business entrepreneurs? Were there systems in place for them to easily access it? And wanting to provide services quickly, did we set up the infrastructure for banks to be able to work with these communities that may or may not be ready to access this funding? And the truth of the matter is, by the time we make sure the information is provided to everyone and they're understanding what it is, the source of the fundings have ended, and a lot of small business entrepreneurs could not take advantage of some of those opportunities. So I'm like everybody else. I'm anxious every day to, after, like you said, May 5th, May 8th, whatever date that is, that magic date that we go back to normal, if normal is a word. What will that look like for the everyday American, the small business owner that's helping to keep Main Street alive?
You know, I've been thinking a lot about, so we have this huge stimulus package. It's being very unevenly distributed at this point. What could we have done to prepare so that these systems, I mean, basically we needed better systems, right? We knew this was coming. I mean, way before the first case in Wuhan, we knew this was gonna happen. So, you know, I'm gonna direct this specifically to Danny, mainly because I know that, you know, you run this organization called the Freedomists, and so I'm thinking, like, shouldn't we have more federal intervention? Shouldn't we have more federal systems in place so that these residual impacts are not so devastating to people once the virus starts spreading?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
I know. Sorry, but
yeah. So no, that's fine. It's such an interesting issue. There's no perfect solutions. You know, everything has trade-offs. So you're gonna pick your pros and your cons in any decision you make in life. The unfortunate thing about all of this, one of the many unfortunate things, is the way that people's first response is to look to government as the answer to our problems. And that's kind of been something that we've been conditioned to do. And there's utility in what the government is doing to help people. And I wouldn't sit here and say that these stimulus checks, you know, are this terrible thing that we shouldn't be utilizing, because they really are helping get people out of a bind, and they're helping keep businesses alive and keeping people alive. So there's definitely utility in it, and having systems in place, there's certainly good pros to it. But what I would want to really encourage people to do, and the way that things were before there were all these government systems in place, is that people would actually have to think about, how do we solve this apart from government? I think that should always be our first question, is how can we solve this on a personal level? How can we, you know, have savings accounts and have safety nets personally, without necessarily just looking to government as our first answer for, you know, for every problem that comes up? Because what happens when you do that is that we're building dependency on the government. We're growing our national debt outrageously to where we're just printing money and shipping it out. And every time we do that, the value of our dollar gets lower and lower. So we're creating a monster that eventually we're going to have to face. And that's the trade-off. It's nice right now, and I'm not against people getting money right now because we're in a bind and we've got to do something, and I don't want people to suffer. But as far as looking at solutions down the road, we've got to start asking ourselves, how can we start implementing systems personally in our own financial decisions, and in our communities, rather than looking to the big, you know, nanny state to take care of all our problems that might arise in the future. Because it's just the trade-offs down the road are really going to be devastating.
I mean, I feel very lucky because I know I have support, not just, I mean, I feel financially secure, but I know that if anything happens, I have support around me. But so many people don't have that, and it's not necessarily by their own choice. And so that's what I worry about. It's not about me. It's about other people. So, I don't know the answer, and I don't know, but I do know that, I love, Wayne, what you said, where your family is pooling resources to help your family. But you're not a rich guy, I assume. I don't know. Are you in the 1%? I'm gonna guess that you're not. No one in this group is.
No.
So
no, but like Daniel mentioned, I've been educated well enough to where I know how to manage money. I know what I can spend. I don't overspend. I choose not to have something rather than having to have a huge debt over my head. So that's something that I don't think is taught very well. I think education's a big part of it. And this thing that's happening in our country right now is I think it's it's the same thing as, why is California got different packages to help people versus Alaska versus your communities? It's the same thing with healthcare. Why is it that if you live here you get this level of healthcare, but if you live here you get that level of healthcare? And so I think that goes back to our government, that if they are making some of these rules, I think it needs to be a little more universal, so that when we have something that we need and we're paying for a service, that there's value in that service. And right now, I look at our government as it's so management top heavy that it's really not doing a good job, regardless of what the topic is.
And going back a little bit to just the ability to live within your means, the costs of things that we have to have is so high for some people that that's not a possibility. They do go without, yet they still can't pay their bills or save money or be prepared for an emergency like this. And I think that that's something that has to be recognized. And I think it was Gracie that made the comment that you have to have some level of privilege to even be able to comply with a stay-at-home order. And that's so true, and something that I've really realized I need to be thankful for, because I can work from home and I don't have to go anywhere if I don't want to. But there's thousands of people just in our community who don't have that choice. And even employers are relaxing the policies where, if they feel a little bit sick or if they've been exposed to somebody, that they can stay home and not be docked points or be without pay. They can access sick pay more easily than normally, which is great, but they don't understand that. And honestly, they don't believe it all the time. And so much of not just the financial and the medical and all these different ramifications come back to culture as well. And we do have a lot of people in our country now who believe that prayer and their God or their higher being is going to protect them. And so they're going to continue life as they do, as is, or as their higher being tells them they're supposed to. And sometimes that means praying in large groups. And oftentimes that means living with a family of 10 or plus, or being close to a lot of people. And so there's a lot of those things at play too, not just people making decisions now or in the past to live outside of their means. But I mean, even when you look at your cell phone bill, that's something that our parents didn't have to deal with 30 years, 40 years ago. It wasn't a thing. And now if you don't have a cell phone, sometimes you don't have internet access to buy your groceries, to help your kids with school, to do to talk to your family back in whatever home might be for you. So, and cell phones are expensive. I mean, my family affords $350 or something like that. So it's not always people's choices to be living as far outside of their means as they end up. Sometimes it's just how society and the cost of things are these days, and wages not keeping up with the cost of living in general. So, while I agree that there's a lot of people who shouldn't have accessed the PPP program, and probably a lot of people who don't need stimulus support, there needs to be a way to help those that are consistently, not just now, but consistently struggling financially. And sometimes it's an income problem, and sometimes it's an expense problem, but sometimes it's a lot more than that. And healthcare is would be one of those biggest equalizers, I think, if there was a way to equalize healthcare across the country. One of the things, when you look at not just Germany, but other countries across Europe and Canada and all these other nations, part of the reason they've been able to react and have better outcomes is because people aren't afraid to go seek medical care. Just this weekend, there was a Somali lady who was positive with COVID, but had another medical issue that she went to the emergency room for, and didn't tell the ER docs when she got there that she'd already been diagnosed with COVID because she thought they wouldn't treat her for this other pain that had come up. And I don't know how many people she saw or was exposed to before they realized in her chart that she was positive, and wasn't there for those reasons, was there for other reasons. But she was afraid to tell anybody that she was sick because she thought they would turn her away and she wouldn't get the other pain taken care of. So, and that's common, not just with COVID. There's a lot of people who are afraid to seek medical care because of the cost or because of what it could mean for immigration status, for work, for whatever it might be. So we need to equalize healthcare access and affordability and things like that across the nation as well.
And I think you hint on it. Equal access America has never been equal in any way, shape, or form. And government for me is a sense of insurance. It's a sense of I'm paying into the system. So when I have an emergency, then I am supposed to be able to rely on that insurance system to come in aid. That doesn't mean codependency. I think we all get car insurance for the day we have an accident, right? But our hope is never to really use it because our premiums will go up. But if it happens, we want to be able to use it. So when I hear this, sometimes that argument about less government, what's the issue is the inconsistency of government. I think if there's a level of consistency in checks and balance, the same level playing fields for everyone, then I think that what we call the unequal balance of power, the fact that we have a shrinking middle class and that all the wealth is in the top 1%, that is a problem. And it's not being solved by everyday layman people, because everyday layman people are not exercising their privilege, which is the right to vote, the right to speak up and check back government. So I totally understand some of that argument, but I do believe government needs to step in to equalize the bar. And when the bar is not equal, then you have things like the most determinant of health is poverty, right? So you're seeing it across the board. Communities that have increased poverty has the highest case of these. They still have to go to work. They still have pre-existing conditions. So then, therefore, it's going to impact them in their community and impact the community as a whole. I think sometimes we are either extreme left or extreme right, but I always tell, even to my activist friend, you need to always think about the moderate middle. The moderate middle is not looking for a revolution. The moderate middle just wants to come to a safe home, feed their family, and go to work. And either if you're on the left or either if you're in the right, if you can think about what could help and support the moderate middle, I think we would answer a lot of questions. But the funny thing about the moderate middle is they are not your activists. They are not the ones that are going to sound the alarm. They're the ones that keep going with it. They're the victims, because right now, the person that's suffering the most on this is going to be the moderate middle, because they're the small business owners, right? They're the ones that keep the economy going, but they can't employ those 5 to 10 employees anymore. So then it's almost like a trickle down effect, but it's not impacting the high earners. It's impacting those consistent groups that's keeping the economy churning. So I think if we can think about what can help the moderate middle, in this time of crisis, we would help the whole country as a whole.
Danny, I see you nodding your head. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah. I appreciate those thoughts, Gracie. I agree with a good bit of what you're saying, especially about the moderates. Just recognizing that they're not the political types, so they're not the ones raging and yelling. But at the end of the day, they just want to go home to a safe home and have a good life. And I think that's a point that needs to also be taken to the left and the right. The more the political activists, by far the majority of people on both the left and the right want the same thing. Humans have basic desires and we want to have a good life. And there's not very many people waking up going, man, I wonder how I can destroy the country today. But yet that's what we tend to think on the extreme left and right. We look at each other and think, you guys are a bunch of either stupid or you just want to hurt our country. And I think that kind of rhetoric is really destroying the dialogue that Philippa has been trying to encourage, which I really appreciate. I did think it was interesting, Gracie. I don't want to try to corner you or anything, but I was just curious to know more about what you think on this. You said that the government has never been equal, or it's never been fair. Would you say we've had a pretty corrupt government throughout our history? I mean, that's not something I would disagree with. I'm not trying to disagree with that. But are you saying that your view of the way our government has been is a lot of corruption and hasn't been very equal?
No, I would not say. I would not say corruption. I okay. Originally, we're not supposed to say a lot of things, but I'm originally from Haiti, so I can't speak anything about corruption. Okay. But I do think one thing we don't address a lot is that America is a class system, and we always want to put that America is only these political systems, like we have Republican and Democrats, but there's classism in America, right? You can see it from any neighborhood you go to, and it appears the same way as a government. Today, you're basically buying your representatives, and I don't want to sound like an over passionate, excited, regular Flo Joe on the street, but the truth of the matter is you pay to play. And the average American, the average person is in the neighborhood level, definitely in the neighborhood level, it's impacting their representative. But as you climb up the tier, you lose more influence on governing that. And also, as the person of African descent, as we know, we haven't had equal rights in the United States until the quote unquote 50s. It's been literally maybe 40, 50 years. And it still, as you can see how it is disseminated across the country, is not equal. And so when I say the thing that the government is not saying that there's corruption to that level, some people would argue that there is, but I'm saying it's the inconsistency of your representatives, inconsistency of the political system, and inconsistencies in how we engage and hold government accountable.
You know what? Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just to follow up and be clear, do you think that politicians in general are pretty trustworthy, or do you think that the majority of them are maybe dishonest or have their own interest in mind?
No, I don't. I don't think, I would like to believe I'm a semi-positive person. I don't believe people go in to be deceptive, but I do think they lean towards the interests of those that support them. So some people it's not necessarily that I go in to be dishonest, but if I'm making a lot of promises, one person is going to get disappointed. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I was curious just to get some clarity on your perspective. I just want to understand your perspective.
Yeah. Well, what I think is so interesting is that a conversation that began around COVID and the response to COVID does raise all of these social issues that are really important, social and political issues. And it does encompass all of that. And so I do think it's a really interesting conversation that we should continue another time. I do want to get to one last question for the purposes of today. This is really going to open up a rabbit hole or Pandora's box, whatever the saying is. But, how do you feel about the media's response to COVID? Wayne?
Someone said on the radio the other day, do you want to listen to the media and be misinformed, or do you want to not listen to the media and not be informed? I think that the media per usual, has done a really poor job at putting out facts, and it just depends on who you're listening to, and it's really sad because a lot of the misinformation's coming right out of the White House, and so it starts from there, and then all these people are coming up with their own spin, and it's just really poor media. I think that people should be looking at their states. They should be looking at national news and look at and bring it together to be able to make an informed decision. But it's really sad what the media does to our country.
Who do you trust right now for your
I honestly don't trust much of the media at all. There's a few stations I'll listen to, but I'll go to on COVID, I'll go right to the COVID site and read the articles and what's going in our system. I don't know if I'm guessing this is throughout. We have something called Nixle, to whenever there's a press release or something like that, it sends out a text and it tells us, this many people have, this many new cases, or it could be an Amber Alert. It could be, so it sends out these, then you can go directly to the state's website and look at the information right there.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Erica? How do you feel the media has affected or is reporting, and how good of a job do you think they're doing writ large?
I would echo Wayne's comments, but also add that it's really unfortunate that all the finger pointing on all sides started so early. I mean, we're not even through this, and every station is already finding somebody to blame rather than continuing to find ways to solve this. Locally, our local news generally does a pretty good job of not having spin on things that they report. And so our local public radio writes news that then they email to some identified translators who are translating the news into their language. And I think we've got 4 of our most common right now. They're trying to find interpreters for 2 more that would cover probably our main languages in the community. So then they translate the news, and this is daily, and then they email that audio file back to the public news station, who then publishes it and puts it out on social media and on their website and wherever they can get to. And so that's how we've been, at least into the immigrant communities, trying to get more information that doesn't have the spin on it, because a lot of them aren't watching Fox and MSNBC anyway, but that way they're getting good information on a daily basis in their language, and hopefully knowing where that resource is. And so I think that's been helpful, but there just is so much information right now that I think it's really overwhelming for people to even know where to go. And when you add to our area 3 states, 3 governors, 3 health departments, and the national levels of all of that, it's even more confusing for people. So we use CDC information most of the time and try to go directly to their sources. Also, some of the national organizations that I partner with have compiled some files like Google Drives and things like that of a lot of different resources that are already translated in different languages. So we're able to use those to get to people. It's just finding the most updated ones and ones that explain it. Because we do have a lot of populations that don't read and write in their own language. So trying to find ones with really good pictures is also a little bit challenging, since things were done pretty quickly. But yeah, in general with national media, and this is long before COVID, just felt like the downfall of our media is when they decided to have news last 24 hours a day. I mean, there's just not that much news. And so then it has to become more of commentary, and then there's going to be a spin on it because people take that opportunity. So if you go back to just the 6 o'clock nightly news, not much room to spin within that. But yeah, I wish that there wasn't so much finger pointing already. It'd be better to just get through all of this and then figure out what we could have fixed, maybe, rather than trying to already start pointing fingers. And I know it's an election year, so that's only going to make it worse, but it would be nice to just know that you're getting all the good facts and all the good data.
I want to talk about, because I was going to ask this sort of as a little surprise, but it is an election year. And so media is going to play a big role in everything we hear in the next many months. It's going to be very exhausting. I mean, how, COVID has certainly made the media more verbal, more. So how are we going to even have an election this year? What do you all think about what's going to be happening between now and November? Danny, I know you have a thought. You're smiling.
It's going to be, unfortunately, and we're already seeing this. It's getting spun into the whole political web and the campaign ads, and Joe Biden's already coming out with jabs on the way Trump has handled this. I just think it's really sad. I think it's unfortunate. Like we said earlier, I think the left and the right needs to understand that neither side has the intention of going out and destroying lives and destroying the country. And to take something this tragic and serious that really shouldn't be political, and using it for campaign purposes is I hope that's something that people are gonna react to in a negative way. I hope that kind of opens up people's eyes to just see the reprehensible mudslinging and grabbing onto anything you can to make a point or the advantage. It's definitely going to affect the debate. But I don't think at the end of the day, I mean, by the time we get to the actual election, this will have had, quite a bit of time to cool down. And people are already starting to get less and less interested with, hearing about all the hype and Corona and everything. People are really ready to move on. A lot of people are ready to move on. And that doesn't mean that we're not still facing tragedy and crisis, and it's obviously still affecting our lives, but I think people are ready mentally and emotionally for the next stage. And I think that we'll still have a good, solid general campaign and a good election still. So,
any thoughts, Gracie?
Everything is political. That's just my belief. Everything is political, and any situation will be turned into a political, what you call it, volleyball. That's unfortunate, like you said, Daniel, because this is something that shouldn't have been political, but it is. One of the biggest things for us in Michigan was the supply chain, because we couldn't get masks. It became a bidding war between states, and Michigan doesn't have budgets like the bigger states, so we end up losing out a lot of times. But it goes back to the supply chain. Most of the supplies were coming from overseas. Nothing truly was being produced in our backyard. Luckily, 3M had the foresight after previous crisis to basically have a setup where they can get online really quickly to support community, but 3M could not supply for the entire United States and every hospital that is available on. What I would like to come out of this, because I don't think there should ever be going back to normal, and I think that's why we end up in situations like that. We go back to normal. We don't learn lessons from these situations so that we can apply them for, God forbid, a next time. And I would hope from this particular situation, we all learned what worked, what didn't work, what could we do better. And that one of the things that come back is having small manufacturing, sustainable manufacturing come back to the United States. Because I'm in a Rust Belt state. I am in Detroit. Some people might be like, Gracie, you sound different right now. but when it hits you so personally, right, that you are seeing you can't even get the cloth you need to make a face mask to serve the hospitals, the providers that are helping your people, it makes you starting to realize and question some of the decisions and the policies that are being made that are impacting everyday community. And then going back to the media question, that's the one thing I rely local, because the rest of it is a social media, a stage for over misinformation, misuse of information, mishandling of us as a people and our trust. So definitely relying on local news and the local stations to provide the most reliable information, because everything else is a show.
You know, I thought we could end on a positive note. I thought you were going there almost, Gracie, because I thought what we could think about is what positive thing can come of this once we get through the worst. What do you all see as a lesson learned that could lead to something positive? What can we learn? Erica? Or anyone?
One thing I was just talking to one of my colleagues about this morning is how it's really changing the way we're doing things like workforce development. She's the director of one of our community colleges, and they've been able to transition to online. But they also do a lot of applied technologies like welding, and their welding department has been able to make some inroads with local employers that are willing to take on some of their students as an apprentice and at different levels. And he's been able to say, look, this is the training I know they have. This is where they probably are. Can you take them from there and develop them? And then, we'll test them and get their certification. And so there's been a lot of resistance in the past to that type of model. And instead having people go entirely through their training before they're then turned into an intern or an employee at a company. And this is opening up this new concept of both the hands-on and the theory-based learning at the same time in some of these programs. And it should be beneficial down the road and help people get jobs and transition a little bit easier. Even with our English language learners and some of the adult basic education that's been happening through the community college, they've been able to transition a lot of that to online, which has been great, because then the people who are already so busy in their lives don't have to fit within the structure of a class. They can watch lessons and videos as their time allows, which has been more helpful and lets more people participate. It's also, though, and not to switch back to a negative, but it's really brought out the difference between classes as well with internet availability. I think every internet provider in our tri-state area is providing free internet right now to families that didn't have it, and at least through the end of what the school year is supposed to be. So kids are able to get online and things like that, and there have been accommodations made. But I think that down the road, some of the ways that we're learning and the ways that we're teaching are going to transition in a lot of cases for the better. Even with high school kids, you see a lot of changes in the way that the high school learning is happening. And with my own kids, I even see where their grades are great. They've actually been graded on things for several weeks now, and they've been doing a really good job because they're learning on their time and in their way, and being able to review and learn things differently and use different resources to learn. And for them, it's been more effective. So hopefully some of those models, both high school, college, and adult education, will continue to be implemented, because it seems to be effective once people transition and if they have access to technology and internet.
Great. Danny, what do you see for the future?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of good things that could come out of this. You don't want to sound too positive when there's something as serious as as this going on, but in any crisis or tragedy, it causes a lot of things to happen. It causes people to think more deeply and to maybe sometimes, hopefully, put aside some petty differences and disagreements. Obviously, there's a lot of division in our country. There's a lot of hatred in our country that's just really not sustainable. There's a lot of yelling and a lack of dialogue and a lack of empathy, or the ability to have a little humility and listen and come together as humans and not just as manifestations of an ideology. So I really hope and pray that, and I believe this is happening to some extent. I hope it continues to happen and to increase. But I hope that just having this common enemy and having this shared experience that everyone's going through together is going to help bring people together and provide some healing to the hatefulness and to the division. And just seeing the acts of kindness and the way that people are, showing more empathy and looking at each other as fellow bearers of this situation definitely has a way of bringing perspective and pulling people together. So I hope that we're really learning from this, and that relationships are being created and a bond is being made that isn't going to dissipate, a few weeks after all this is over. We'll have a big test coming up with the election. That'll be our big exam to see how we did, if we made any progress or not. And it's going to be tough. There's going to be a lot of people that are the same, but I'm hoping that there's some healing.
Yeah, I'm with you, Danny. I'm going to hire him as my PR person for the Looking for America project. How about you, Wayne? What do you see?
I know.
I think that, everyone's had really good points. I think that, being able to bring some manufacturing back to our country and not have to compete with, some of the world markets would be kind of a nice thing to know where your stuff is coming from, and that the workforce is being protected while manufacturing it. The other thing is I believe in more trade schools, to be honest with you. If people are going to have higher education and they're going to use higher education, then there'll be colleges for that, whether it's a building you go to or online. But I think a lot of people end up in some form of a trade in our country. And, my experience as a kid, that's where you learned what you learn is learning a trade and going to work at younger ages. And I think that we've lost something in the years of that going by the wayside. But I'm hoping that this is going to be a good, stepping stone for what communities can do for each other when this happens. Because, as everyone's noticed, not all states are running on the same playing field, whether it be education or financial status. Again, I grew up in Alaska, so we've always been a fairly wealthy state when it comes to education and resources for folks without means. Where other states, they can barely get medical, and that's kind of sad to see. So I'm hoping this is going to be a positive, turnaround for our country to be able to get somebody in office that can help make some of these changes happen.
Thank you all so much. This was one of the most fascinating conversations I've had in a long time, honestly. And I'm really thankful that you all were willing to participate.